Welcome, everyone, to the first Neurogether Podcast. I am Carter Smith, co-founder of Neurogether. Joined at my hip right now is our founder, our CEO, and our... Sharma? Is that how it's pronounced? No? Is it Guru?
I mean, you would never get the Indian accent.
I'd never get the Indian accent down, would I? Okay. Joined here with me is my good buddy, good pal, and CEO of Neurogether, Utkarsh Gupta. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. Thank you. Been a good day so far, and I'm really excited to be a part of this podcast. And yes, so the idea of having Neurogether Podcast is unlike any other podcast where we do not focus on a specific area of expertise, but rather we're going to deal into the personal journey of neuroenthusiasts. And here we are talking about our journeys and also journey of other people in due time. So talking about journey, I have a very peculiar journey of how I have become a cognitive neuroscientist in the last 10 years. So I started off with developing interest in human body and particularly the nervous system of human body back when I was in school. And then that has developed ever since. I ended up doing an undergrad in medicine right after my schooling, where I kind of fell in love with the central nervous system and peripheral nervous system, and I really wanted to do research in that. I did my fair share of clinical side, but then I was never really satisfied, and I ended up taking a research program at Anglia Ruskin, where I met Carter, my fellow co-founder. And that is where our journey started. But apart from that, after my master's, my journey took a turn, like a big turn into proper research. And then I have found myself completely away from clinical practice, but I have been looking into basics of cognitive neuroscience. So I have been working on autobiographical memory and bodily self-consciousness lately. And I can assure that this journey has been ever so amazing, and I love what I'm doing right now. But this podcast is not about me. I took my fair share of time to introduce myself, but here with us, we have an amazing person with whom I have been friends for over 1 year, and I would like to introduce Shanna. So, Shanna, if you would be willing to introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today. I am just finished my first year doing undergraduate psychology here at Anglia Ruskin. Really enjoyed it so far, so looking forward to going into my second year.
That's great. What was the interest that you had going into Anglia Ruskin? What was your big interest in psychology like?
So it's been an interesting journey to get to this point. So I trained as a personal trainer back in around 2017. And whilst I was working with clients, I found the sessions to be much more therapeutic than just kind of, about the physical side of things. And they really enjoyed, talking to me about things that were going on in their life and struggles they were having. And I really enjoyed listening and trying to help. So I decided to go back to college to get the UCAS points I needed to go to university because I hadn't finished my A-levels when I was younger. And once I started studying, it was called an access course, so it was kind of an accelerated version of A-levels, really. I studied psychology as one of the subjects, and I just fell in love with it. It was fantastic. I've always had a broad interest in self-development and that kind of side of things.
Is that kind of what got you into personal training?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. So at the time, I was very interested in mixing, the kind of physical benefits with the mental health kind of benefits. And that was always a big focal point of mine when I was teaching classes and working with clients.
That's good. Yeah. And do you think that a lot of personal trainers have this kind of experience as well? Like maybe they're a personal trainer, but also almost like a personal therapist?
It's known in the industry. I think if you are of a particular personality type that has quite a lot of empathy and compassion, that you just naturally fall into that.
That's interesting.
Others very much like the physiology side of it, which of course is on
Endorphins.
face value is kind of, the purpose of it, I suppose. Yeah. But I do know personal trainers who have also done cognitive behavioural therapy courses as a side thing to help with the kind of behavioural aspects of changing habits. So there's definitely a broad range of depth to being a personal trainer. Of course, you get the ones, who just, want to help people lose weight and stuff like that. But
yeah, like I would go there to get six-pack from the beach, as we said earlier.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have really thought that you could go get like almost a, I wouldn't say it's a cheaper therapist, but like necessarily like you work both body and mind, but you go to train body just by accident. You're also training your mind as well.
Yeah, 100%. And it's the crazy thing that it's so well known out there now. I mean, doctors and, mental health professionals have been saying this for years. There's many, many studies to say that exercise is amazing for your mental well-being. Mm-hmm. But of course, there's the long-term challenge of finding the motivation. If you have mental health difficulties, finding motivation to exercise, it's just a vicious cycle. And where do you break it? Mm-hmm. But I just found like I used to teach group classes as well, and I'd get the same people coming back all the time, and they would just offload about their week. And I was working at the leisure club based on Addenbrook's site. So all of these people were medical professionals in really tough jobs, nurses and all the rest, And mm-hmm. So to listen to them and let them offload, about the difficulties they were suffering in their jobs. And after working 12-hour shifts, the fact that they would come to me to help unwind just felt like a real privilege, But I could see it was really beneficial. And then working together with each other, they were having a laugh and just relaxing. And you can just see the stress just coming out. It was wonderful.
That's exciting, actually, in some ways, because I didn't know that Addenbrook's actually had a gym on site. I would assume most hospitals, now that I think about it makes sense that most hospitals would have some sort of exercise area, at least in a lab of some sort.
You would think so, wouldn't you? But we're actually, Addenbrook's was, it's quite a rarity to have one of those. So we had a whole leisure centre with a swimming pool, a bar and restaurant and everything. So it was only for NHS staff that were on the campus. Right. But I could see the benefits, and we used to have a lot of med students coming in from Cambridge University as well. And of course, that's very renowned. Of course, Utkarsh would vouch for this as well. Being a med student is incredibly stressful.
Definitely.
So, yeah.
It comes with the package.
Yeah.
You cannot escape that stress being a med student. And unlike other courses, it's a long journey. My undergrad took me 6 years. I mean, I had a little extra because apart from the 4.5 years of theory and then 1 year of practical, I also did elective rotations. So for that, I went to US, and then I had elective rotations in neuroradiology, pediatric neurology, and so it's tedious. It's really tough because going through all the different parts of human body, knowing about it, the underlying basis of functionality, but also the application of it towards various clinical implications. It's like there's plethora of information that needs to be dealt with. So moving on. Shanna, you mentioned quite a lot how you developed your interest, from personal training, then mind and body, and then also are there any other triggers that directed you to be who you are right now, an undergrad psychology student?
So I have a few personal life experiences through the years as well, which have become particular interests of mine. So speaking personally, I've had my own struggles with depression since I was 18 years old, but I never wanted it to consume my life and kind of, take over basically. So that's where quite a lot of the interest in self-help books and self-development has become a huge part of my daily life. Mm-hmm. It's something I have to actively work on every day. So I just started to, obviously you delve into things, the biochemical side of things, the psychological side of things, your environment, circumstantial things, all of these. And So I'm 34 now, and, you know, I still haven't been able to be rid of it, but I've just learned to, you know, live with it, and I've just found, you know, my ways. But I've done a lot of reading and research over the years into just managing that. But that's where a lot of my passion comes from, is unfortunately, you know, I understand within the NHS there's funding difficulties to put the time and the manpower into looking at all these different aspects of a person with mental health difficulties. You know, we see depression and anxiety rates going through the roofs these days, you know.
And the pandemic probably hasn't helped.
Absolutely this, yep. And it's just, there's just not enough support to really figure out what's going on with that particular person and how we can change that person's life. So, I mean, thinking forward for my kind of long-term journey, I know it's a big dream, but I have a real interest in, you know, there have been many therapeutic approaches, obviously, that have been developed over the decades. Yeah. And some of them are still used today. Some of them have been tweaked and kind of upgraded. Some have kind of been debunked a little bit. But I would love to somehow be a part of developing something that was a bit more all-encompassing, to focus on all those different aspects of what affects a person's mental health, especially in particular depression and anxiety, to just, yeah, not just be focused on one particular aspect, you know, not just giving someone medication to deal with the biochemical side, not just giving, say, CBT for a behavioural or a cognitive issue, but to try and encompass a lot of things, to try and give that person, you know, the best chance, which is what I've done for myself. But it's just because I'm hugely motivated to not let it overcome me, is where my motivation has come from, you know.
It's really commendable that you have a clear vision of what you want to do in future. But from our conversation, what I find even more commendable is the fact that when, of course, during pandemic, like, we have all been affected by it, and you would hear stories where students are deferring their courses or leaving out courses and then thinking of starting off at some other point. You, on the other hand, took a brave decision to start your course during the pandemic. So I'm really curious, what was the motivation behind it?
That's a really good question. It's not been easy because, of course, I have 2 children as well, which I'm raising by myself, and homeschooling them as well as educating myself through uni obviously has been very stressful. Yeah. Do you know, it's just sheer determination. I see where I want my life to go, and I'm going to make it happen.
How much coffee on a daily basis do you consume?
Oh, my goodness, it was too much.
Oh,
yeah.
Man. Yeah. The amount of stuff that you probably need to get through that day. Wow.
Yeah, there was a lot of tears at times, I won't lie.
Oh, no.
But the funny thing is it sounds really simplistic, but we know that the brain can be trained effectively, you know, so you just have to, through those times I had to tell myself sometimes hundreds of times a day, like, you can do this, just do it, just get through it, you know. Don't just stay in bed and cry, because that's not going to make anything better. It's not going to change anything, but just keep pushing through. And it's very difficult. I've had many years when I was younger in the past where I've not been able to do that, you know, like sometimes days, weeks would become kind of, you know, a depressive kind of low. But over the years, I've just realised that I can't let those get the better of me. And I didn't want to lose another year, you know, because I've already waited this long to be able to do my education. I waited till my kids were old enough to be more independent so that, you know, I had the time. The pandemic was just a very unfortunate addition, but I just didn't want to waste another year. It was just like, right, it's now or never. I'm just going to do it. And
when you said you had suffering from depression since you were 18, right? Do you find that there was like you were picking up almost telltale signs that you were kind of slumping, and that you were able to like kind of create almost like cognitive behavior therapy for life, you know, like before it even happened. If you think about CBT as being a big, long journey through your therapy, and you find different ways of combating those thought processes, almost like you combat and change your lifestyle in a specific way, especially as a personal trainer. You mentioned, do you do exercise nowadays to kind of keep yourself in check, or is that one of the strategies that you pick up?
I do, yeah. It's funny because, again, with exercise, I've suffered the same difficulties that most people with mental health have, is that, there's peaks and troughs with it. Sometimes you feel like, okay, I can do this, and you get into a really good pattern, and then something particularly stressful will pop up in life.
Oh, it just takes one, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Then you miss a day, then it becomes 2 days, then it's a week. And then before you know it, it's like, oh no, I haven't exercised in 6 months and I've gained so many pounds and now I feel rubbish and starting back from the beginning again. So I did find last year quite stressful in a lot of times. And so I've made it a particular goal of mine this summer break to start exercising again. I've read books on the kind of neuro aspect of self-discipline, which has been really helpful, actually.
Very interesting field of study, isn't it?
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. And it's actually been really, really useful because it's almost like you're having an internal conversation in your head and you have to ignore, these kind of thoughts all the time, like, just rest today. It's fine. You can do it tomorrow. And you just have to try and blank them all out and just do what you've set your mind to do. But having that understanding of, how the brain works and what it will try to tell you, because, from what I've read, a lot of this can go back to kind of, your kind of survival instincts, basically, and comes back to evolutionary biology. And that's another really interesting field, and you just have to make yourself do things. And I feel like I'm going to be starting my second year off in a really strong place, which I needed because I'm also taking on a few kind of extra roles. Yeah,
speaking of the extra roles, I think Utkarsh told me that you were being appointed
Vice President.
Vice President of
the Women's Society.
Wow, that's a big take on.
It is, and I did kind of battle with myself, like, oh my goodness, am I crazy for taking on such a huge thing in my second year? But it's something I'm hugely passionate about.
Fantastic.
We know, obviously, in the media and stuff at the moment that, women's safety and well-being has been a huge topic of conversation the last few months, and rightly so. So what we're aiming to do is just really focus on the safety and the well-being aspect. So we're just trying to create a nice environment for the young women who are coming on campus to become acclimatized with their new settings. A lot of people are coming away for their first time away from home.
Very true.
They're going to be anxious, and we just want them to have a safe place to go to. And so, we're hoping to,
Is this the first year that I've been an Anglia-Ruskin student for almost 6 years now, but I've only ever heard of the Students' Union. I've never actually known that there was a specific women's line of...
it's
almost a line of communication.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not... I know in the past year it wasn't very active because I joined several societies in my first year, and some still managed to maintain quite a lot of activity, be it online. But I think others just, they kind of faded a little bit.
Sure.
But this year we basically are rebranding it, and we are just bringing it back in a big way. The president... her and I have become really good friends, and we're very, very ambitious and motivated women. So we're looking forward to making something really special of it. And I hope to continue into my third year as well.
That's brilliant. And yes, we could really appreciate the importance of communication here. And then my next question would be that during your journey in you becoming a neuro enthusiast, what specific importance have you found regarding good communication and networking? Because I'm pretty sure over the years you would have had chances to network with various other people with similar interests. But how has it developed your, of course, interpersonal skills, but also developed you academically and professionally? That would be really interesting to know.
It's been hugely important, actually, for my own personal growth and, probably academic as well, branching from my last job as well, working on the Addenbrooke site. I was able to meet people from a range of jobs, from HCAs, up to consultants, and it was amazing. I met quite a few people who were working in psychology and neuroscience, which was amazing as well. And then coming to ARU and, having all these people to be able to get to know and their experiences, it's really helped with my confidence as well. Because for a long time, I never believed that I would get this far. And just, being taken in by people that are, on all these different journeys just feels really good. It's just like, oh, actually, like, you shouldn't undervalue yourself. You should just try, and you never know where you'll fit in, and, where you'll end up being. But yeah, obviously in relation to Neurogether, the website has been amazing.
It wasn't too daunting. It wasn't like, I was always worried that when we were creating the website that it was going to be the exact same thing as university. Like, it was going to be, we were going to create a society, or like almost like a group that was going to be just as daunting for other people to join in. So like, you coming in and saying that's really helpful to know.
Yeah, I see what you mean, because sometimes these things can almost seem a bit kind of cliquey almost, like, oh, I'm not going to belong there. But it's been amazing to see the broad range of people that are on the site, and the editorials that get put out, and, people's discussion points have been amazing, because as we all do have specific interests, and we quite often tend to stay within those unless, we're encouraged to look outside of that. So sometimes if someone posts something that I haven't really looked at before, I'll just be like, oh, that sounds kind of interesting, and then you're like, wow, this is amazing. And I already have a book collection that's like way beyond what I could possibly read, and my audiobook collection. But every time I see something new on Neurogether, I'm like, oh, I should look into that as well. So I don't know if I'll have enough years in my life to read everything and look into everything that I'd love to, but it's been amazing to be a part of it. Actually, it's been really amazing.
I completely agree with you. Like, even when we were creating Neurogether, we did not particularly realize the extent to which we could provide a platform for like-minded people. But then, as and when we proceeded with beta testing, then we got some good responses from people all around the world. So we have beta testers from India, from Iran, from America, and from Southeast Asia, exactly, from Argentina as well. And then, like, we are getting to know so much about the work that is being done globally. And then I think that is such a good outcome that, like, we were anticipating, but the scale of it's just amazing. And I think like, it would be amazing to have more and more people on Neurogether, and like, we will have opportunity, like, because none of us are perfect, of course, right?
Yeah.
But it's only the connections and the network that we make that makes us closer towards perfection.
Absolutely. But this is where new ideas come from as well. And like you spoke about connections, is because, like I said earlier, a lot of these things maybe need to start coming together to be researched as a multidisciplinary style, obviously my particular interest is mental health and kind of looking at those kind of things. But, if more people were to start coming together, or when people post things, you'll see the connections between things, and that's when you're going to start finding whole new fields, perhaps, little subfields when they're connected, and it just broadens everything for more and more research and future studies, and potentially new theories and new therapeutic interventions. And it's just a whole world of new possibilities, really.
Yeah, really. In my opinion, so that's the thing that's holding us back as neuroscientists, is that we do not communicate between our fields. Like, that's something that I've noticed, especially like all very limited conferences that I've gone to. But the ones that the conversation is stifled when we have not difference of opinions, but difference of language. And like how we describe one thing, like the superior temporal sulcus or the Wernicke's area. Almost like exactly the same place. And yeah, they have difference of very slightly different regions, but they're the same area. And when someone might not know exactly what that is. And learning the anatomy of the brain is very important, of course, too. But
Yeah.
for someone who's just entering that field and doesn't immediately know that, they have to go back and look in their books. You know, the
Yes.
conversation is stopped, and we lose control of the conversation on top of that. And that's something that we definitely wanted to address with Neurogether as well. It's like we wanted to have almost like a connection of language as it comes into it. And
Yeah.
I'm noticing slang is becoming more of a thing in neuroscience as well. Just like going on, say, like r/neuroscience on Reddit, like everyone has these new slang terms that are being created in different countries when this research is meant to be like shared globally. But when they create new slang terms and whatnot, that almost sounds like we're being left out. Like, and if they, for whatever reason, if they say this like term came into a published journal, now it's going to confuse everyone. So that makes it official.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to be fair, like, it's not just the slang terms itself. Like, if you look at the various theoretical models for a particular cognitive ability of humans, then you'd find several different theoretical models which overlap with each other. And if you browse through all the literature there is, which is plentiful, like, you could never really go through all of them. But then you'd find multiple different theories explaining the same thing. And so in my experience, I was recently doing a systematic literature review in which, like, for one particular behavioral aspect, there are multiple theories which overlap, and then they have different terms. And then, you know, you really find it hard to consolidate and then potentially, like, move in one good direction rather than having arguments and disagreements with multiple different paths that should be converging. So,
100%.
And especially with the communication as neuroscientists, it always seemed to kind of rely on published papers, right? And the problem with published papers is that sometimes, not always, that they're blocked by a paywall. And that definitely stops us from doing our jobs. And with the pandemic, we realized, oh man, we actually need conferences. We actually need to go talk with people face to face, because let's face it, how many ideas will you go through in an hour if you could do things face to face rather than an email or a published paper?
Absolutely.
Right? And it's easy to get a talking point all the way through, especially. But I think that's one of the things that we do want to try and address. But that kind of leads us into a good segue, is you as a very fresh, young psychologist coming out into the field, somewhat daunting, but what is it that you think that this website can provide other than the communication basis? Like, have you found something that maybe you've shifted your attention to something else? Like you said, you're a personal trainer and you're very interested in psychological medicine or psychological therapies. Is there anything that you found on Neurogether that went, actually, am interested in that? I could definitely see myself doing some research in this field. Anything along those lines?
Oh gosh, there's been several things, and actually Utkarsh and I have had personal conversations actually around some of that, because there's, a few big trends kind of at the moment which are quite new. There's obviously a lot of discussion around, gender and the neuroscience and that kind of thing. I find that really interesting. Just trying to think of there was something on Neurogether a few weeks ago, and I forget what it was called now. It's escaped me, but I found that particularly interesting as well. Sorry, it's not very useful because I can't remember what it's called.
Was it an editorial, or was it?
I think it might have been an editorial. Yeah.
Was it the early life trauma and?
That's what it was.
Yeah, that's when. Oh, I wrote 100%.
That. Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Amazing. I really find that very interesting, because again, it kind of approaches this subject of, from a psychology perspective, depending on what area you're looking at it from. Some would kind of just look at that from like a conditioning kind of perspective, but there's a lot of science coming out now, or has come out in the last few years, to show that early life trauma leaves lasting impact on your brain, and that's something that needs to be investigated and looked at, because maybe therapies are just not enough. Or the type of therapies need to encompass that, change a little bit to kind of, be more effective, depending on what it is. But there's a lot of people that suffer from trauma in early life, and
absolutely
they have maybe, a typical kind of CBT, talking therapy, EMDR, some of them can be good, but what if there's something better?
True.
You know?
And I think just from my master's being in early life trauma and hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, long word, but affect, really encompassing the research, it's scary that we didn't notice this before.
Yeah.
Like we had the theory that, early life trauma does kind of create long lasting effects, but to actually kind of pinpoint that and not where it occurs, but not even how it happens, but it's there.
Yeah.
And we can see it kind of clearly.
Absolutely.
Like it doesn't have to be like what we consider trauma is very subjective as well. Like that's another thing that we have to kind of look at too, because like a divorce could be traumatic, or one thing that I noticed was one of the best papers, in my opinion, that have come out with early life trauma and HPA, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, kind of dysregulation was after an earthquake. And the 2008 Wenchuan earthquake in China, and they studied kids that went through this earthquake and then kids who didn't. And they noticed that there was indeed an increase of hair cortisol over the months, and then a very big decrease after like 4 or 5 months. That left, and I think there's a paper coming out, hopefully, I think it's this year or next year, that's going to do almost like a reboot of the study. They're going to they're going to find the people and see if that lasted a long-lasting effect. So that's almost like 12 years of that earthquake that happened. So that'd be really interesting to see that research and how like it long lasts. And part of me has to wonder though, when it comes to early life trauma, is the long-lasting effects of the trauma, the pattern that you get yourself into to kind of fix or help yourself with the trauma, and then you get into that nasty circle of rumination and all these extra things, and they just carry on through life, and that's what leaves the chemical signal to be affected, or the biological sense of it to be connected in some way. Very interesting to think about, but neurologically, where does that leave us other than looking at the chemicals and just documenting as it occurs, right? Like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And personal differences would definitely come into a factor there of some sort of way. But then that's just mine. That's my area. And I wonder how it affects self-consciousness. And that's something that you might be able to talk about, Utkarsh.
Yeah, I was actually about to talk about that and then emphasize on the fact that early life trauma is, of course, in nature associated with autobiographical memories, right? So here you go. We have another discussion about interdepartmental approach, or rather intertopic approach towards research. And that is when communication comes in really handy, where we could actually share ideas of how something could be generated or be deciphered or, acknowledged even. And based on that, I think, like you both mentioned earlier, that communication is such a key, and then how Neurogether could potentially help us bridge this gap of communication between us neuro-related people. Regarding that, Shanna, I was really wondering, what is your perspective when it comes to having a thought or having a conversation with already existing neuro enthusiasts who have done a great deal of work in their field? If coming from an undergrad perspective, if you were to expect something out of those already established neuro enthusiasts, what would you expect from them?
That's a really good question. I would really like to see, if you have a passion for your field, then you would want to nurture, incoming talent, incoming academics, and just to perhaps give them time, just a little bit of time and understanding, to help them kind of really keep their passion strong. And because you just always want new people coming through and developing themselves, you just want a constant flow of that. I feel sometimes there can be quite a divide, between those who are coming in as undergrads and those who are well established. And I just feel like maybe it just needs to become just a little bit more blended.
Or approachable almost?
Yes, approachable. Yeah. That's the right word. Yeah, 100%.
I can agree with that, actually.
Because a lot of us, we admire those people that are, that are teaching us, that are higher up.
Yeah.
we read the studies that they've published. We read the books that they've published. We are honoured that they are lecturing us, and we get to know them a little bit. And many of them are very, very lovely, but it's still like there's this fear of approaching them. And sometimes I know that I've had lecturers who I've really wanted to just be like, I'm really interested in this area that you studied, like, do you have any other papers that you'd recommend that I read, or other literature that you recommend that I read? But you just feel afraid to ask them in case you're bothering them and things, because you don't know. I mean, they may be perfectly.
It's like a celebrity effect.
Yeah,
almost.
it is though. I mean,
like that,
maybe it's just me, but knowing that some of my lecturers have written actual books, it does kind of feel a bit like, oh my gosh.
No, totally. I get that exact same thing. Like I think about it, like, should I treat like a fan almost right now?
Yeah,
should like. The first time I ever had a real meeting with a professor that I thought, wow, this guy's like the real deal.
Yeah.
I struggle to get the words out.
Yeah.
And I'm a guy that absolutely gets hit with the wow factor when it comes to seeing like celebrities.
Yeah.
And Utkarsh has seen this in full form when I met one of my guitar heroes. And I just, almost a similar thing happened with the professor. And I read, like, I didn't know it was the guy. And then when I saw he was the same guy on the paper that it was the journal I was reading, it had his cover shot for some reason, and I was like, oh, you're that guy.
Yeah, it's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Yeah, so you get to like have a pinpoint to the brain. You're going to be teaching me? Oh, that's great. Oh man, now I'm totally intimidated, but
Exactly.
We're going to get through this in some way.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of something that not really a barrier that is necessarily a bad thing, but it's definitely like the approachable factor does go down. But to have like researchers as a celebrity, I'm thinking of like Dr. Andrew Huberman, for example. He's quite the celebrity right now. Dr. Jordan Peterson, Clemens Kirschbaum in my field, especially. He's huge right now. Tobias Stalder. Yeah. Even Jane Aspel now, like she's becoming quite big. Flavia Cardini is getting quite big now as well. Or even someone as simple back in the 90s, he would have been quite big. But the autism guy, what's his name? I think Steven said, I forget what his name is. I'll have to look him up afterwards. But he's Cohen. His brother is Sacha Baron Cohen. Okay.
I know who you mean. I can't think of the name.
Yeah, he's a Cambridge professor.
Yes, absolutely. I know who you mean, but I can't think of the name either.
Yeah, he would have been a celebrity back in the day, and then his brother became a bigger celebrity.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
It's huge. Like, and that celebrity effect is definitely approachable. I think having the Neurogether side of things, you might be able to recognize someone that you would have already had on Neurogether for the conference, almost like prepping. Like I'm hoping to see something along those lines. But either way, like it's just I can see exactly where you're coming from.
Yeah, I mean, I know that in the last year, that obviously my first year, there were a few lecturers that did kind of like talks online about their particular areas, or I remember Viren Swami did one because he was releasing a book, and it was just so fascinating. It was amazing, and you just learned so much more, because I attended a few of the kind of optional talks, and again, they were on a range of subjects which I hadn't immediately had ever come to my mind, like, oh, I'm interested in that. But there was one that was about women trying to get out of prostitution, and that was an amazing talk. It's something that I have a strong interest in women's rights and women's needs, but I'd never particularly thought about looking at that particular area. But what I learned from that was amazing, so valuable, and I understand these are very busy people we're talking about, incredibly busy people, but when you're starting out as an undergrad, I don't know about your guys' level, but to learn something from these people is just amazing. It really is.
To add to that, to the celebrity effect, if I may, coming from a third world country, I know the difference, the massive difference that you could have by connections. So back in India, when I was doing my undergrad, then of course I would read papers, and then like these are all just fancy names. Every time I would look at the affiliation, it's always somewhere out there, like University of Cambridge or Oxford University or the
Harvard
Ivy Leagues. And then, I mean, not even that, like just there's such a big international input towards research, and so many amazing work is being done in various fields. And then you tend to really incline towards the fact that I wish I could meet them. I wish I could just have that experience of working with them. And then when I made this decision to come to UK and then carry out my research and then take part in various conferences, the international conferences, like one particular example was when I attended British Neuroscience Association conference. And there I met the Brain Prize winner, Professor Ray Dolan. And then I had the exact same celebrity effect as Carter mentioned earlier. And then I was like, for a brief period of second, I was just awestruck. My jaws went down and I was like, what? But then I got the chance to have a conversation with him, to have a little talk about my ideas, my research that I'm doing at the moment, and then how I could potentially progress in that. And he appreciated that conversation. And I still vividly remember like the whole conversation where I was really nervous, but by the end of that conversation, I was just absolutely filled with various ideas, and I had a clear idea where to proceed next if I were to do that research. So like I was lucky and fortunate to have that experience, but I know that there are many out there across the globe who doesn't really get that opportunity. And I think that is when Neurogether could come in really handy, when researchers are on this platform, whereas you'd find the budding neuroenthusiasts as well joining that platform and then having an opportunity to talk to them, and then having that ease of conversation developing within them is something that could be very magical if this thing actually works.
Yeah.
And yeah, based on that, like I would really love to know more about your perspective towards things. Like I already asked you, what was your perspective? What would you expect from already established neuroenthusiasts? But since you're halfway through in your journey and you know that there would be many following you and you're definitely an inspiration for many, what would be your suggestion, advice, or, keynotes to the budding neuroenthusiasts?
One of my biggest things is read as much as you can. But it's just never limit yourself. Never allow yourself to believe that you don't fit into a particular place or you won't be accepted into a particular place. Just be humble. Just talk to people, and most people will just take you in, Try and make as many connections as possible. Always try and get in amongst people. But yeah, I think that I would say that just read as much as you can and try and make as many connections as you can.
Do you think as a student it's beneficial to talk about research with other students as well?
Oh, massively. I know that as an undergrad, the thing that people have been most stressed about in our first year amongst my cohort is the research modules.
Really?
Because it's something that you just don't touch on before you go into uni. They don't cover that kind of stuff in A-levels, really.
Oh, they should definitely do that.
Yeah, this is the thing. You're not really prepped to go to uni.
Yeah.
So people were freaking out about the statistics software, SPSS we're using. And just when you look at the language of scientific papers, it's just a whole different world to what a lot of A-level students are used to.
Yeah. That's another thing that just makes science so inaccessible, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, because it's just that whole thing that we were talking about earlier. It's just daunting from the outset, which can put up a mental block for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
You can push through it, but it takes a lot of self-belief to be like, okay, this doesn't make sense to me right now, but I'm going to make it make sense. I'm going to make this happen. I remember when I first started looking at scientific papers, you'd get to the results section and you'd just see it looked like another language. I was like, and I think I remember saying to Utkarsh actually around this time, like in the first couple months of my first year, my first trimester, I was just like, does this ever learn to make sense? And I can say now at the end of my first year, and after doing a huge amount of additional reading and practice, it does start to make sense. You can do it. You just never ever tell yourself that you can't. You have to push through that.
Sure.
But yeah, research is daunting for a lot of people. I find it daunting. I was having this conversation the other day that actually the area of going into research really does fascinate me, but I still have that mental block of thinking I probably don't have it in me to go there or be good enough to do that.
You're just not there yet, though. Yeah, you're so young. You're finishing your first year, right? And second year is, in my opinion, where almost you start to develop new ideas.
Yeah.
And then you start really quickly realize those have been done before, because
yes.
it's really hard to be original in science.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like, and I remember in my second year, I thought that I was like, wow, evolutionary pruning. That's got to be so original. And then you look it up and you went, oh, wow, 69 million, really? Hits in a second? Ah, dang it.
Exactly that.
And so I think definitely because what course are you doing?
Psychology.
Yeah, just straight psychology.
Yep, just straight
okay,
psychology.
Because I think on my course that I did at Anglia Ruskin, I don't think it exists anymore, actually. I did abnormal and clinical psychology.
Ah, yeah, they don't have that anymore.
I think it's just psychology and health or something like that.
Yeah, they do have a clinical psychology option.
Yeah.
And then psychology. So then you just basically get more choice in your third year of modules to choose.
Right. Oh, fair enough. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, so that's interesting because I remember in my second year, we had a module called biopsychology, and that obviously that created my interest in bioscience, and that's why I'm now a bio-neuroscientist. But like one of the, I guess, tasks that we had to do, I think it was called an element back then, but we had to read a book and then critique it from a serious list. And I read Richard Dawkins' The Selfish Gene.
Oh,
that
great
unleashed some stuff, right? That a lot of my ideas have come from are inspired by Richard Dawkins' book, of course.
Amazing.
And in the second year, I do hope that you get to have that experience because I'm pretty sure you're doing it this year. I think you have to do a book report or something along those lines. But
yeah, that would make sense because we didn't do it this year.
Yeah,
and we will be covering biopsychology.
Yeah, so you critique something along those lines. And
amazing.
That is definitely I think in my opinion, it's one of the best things to have as a researcher on your belt is like be really good at critiquing work.
Yeah.
And that's another task that it gets there.
Again, it's another thing that people find really daunting.
They're
critical thinking, basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because again, it's not really a skill that's taught to you through a typical education system here in the UK. I don't know about elsewhere, but you just sit and follow. You're not really ever taught to think properly, and just question things. And actually in school, I think if you were to question things, you'd almost probably get told off because it's kind of just like, why are you talking back? Why are you questioning this? Like,
definitely
it is what it is.
So. Yeah, like taking everything as like black and white, especially along those lines. And I think really quickly, one of the biggest realizations as a researcher is that research is the literal definition of gray area. It is not black and white. Like even if, P might equal less than 0.05, a little statistics joke, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's like all the time. And that was definitely one of the biggest factors that I had to learn.
You got to look on the effect size and power all the time.
Yeah.
Yep.
There are so many variables that you need to take into consideration.
Very true. And like the big thing for me, especially going through like the psychology aspect of that, I used to think, oh, well, that's truth now. And like, that I used to say in papers, big mistake. We have proven this. Man, that is not the right word to use in your report. Yeah, you should say.
So true.
Yeah, prove. Malarkey. Yeah, malarkey, man. Say it's consistent with. Right?
Yes.
Say that. Oh no, but yeah, that's definitely like the biggest hump that you kind of get to overthrow as a student. Going through your first year though, just looking back on that.
Yep.
Any regrets? Like maybe not academically, but academically. Like academically, have you made any like severe mistake that went, dang, I really should have saw that one coming. Should I have done something else to fix that? Sure, maybe academic side of things, but like, is there anything also from a home perspective? Like, did you have the proper gear to like go through first year university when it came down to it? Like, good laptop is definitely needed if you're doing it over internet.
Definitely.
Good stable internet connection.
Yeah.
Any regrets there?
Do you know, I've really put everything I have into this year, so I can say for myself I don't feel any regrets. There's been a lot that's taken some getting used to. Like, I'm a bit old school and I love a hard copy book, so to not have access to that, to have to actually read online, because of course we did still have access to everything. The university, I can't fault them, they've been great at, making things really accessible, but reading on the laptop instead of like having that book, it didn't thrill me. But you get used to it. I think in the first year you put a lot of attention onto building your academic skills, things that seem really basic, and that is what I would actually say to anyone incoming to their first year, is that you will get pulled up a lot on your academic writing. No matter how good you think you are, you're more likely going to get picked up on it, because it's just not something that just comes to you. That is something else you have to learn, and it's different from your A-levels and from school. Be prepared to read a lot. I think I could have still tried to read more, even though I did read a fair bit, but I think I could have read more. But no, I don't really feel like I have any regrets. I really put a lot into this year to make it work. I even tried on the social side. I joined societies, even though I knew I wouldn't be able to meet anyone face to face. I just tried to make the best of it. So I do feel like I'm going to be in a good position compared to a lot of my cohort who hadn't perhaps pushed as much as I had, because it takes a lot of courage and confidence to kind of push past, obviously this pandemic has been unprecedented, so everyone's just been finding their own way, but there's a lot of people who are starting their second year who still don't really know anybody. They don't know the campus, they don't know how the library works, and they're having to learn all the first year stuff in second year, where it's already going to be really stressful because we've got more modules, more work, and so that's going to be quite tough. But no, I don't have any regrets, not this year.
That's brilliant. So since you have no regrets, and then of course I can understand that it has been a learning curve ever since you took up this course, and in last 1 year as such, from where you were at, whether making a decision about your career being clinical or research, like, has it fluctuated, or has your interest inclined towards something else when it should not have, or has there been that sort of experience with you in this last 1 year?
So much. So in my head, I already had a really clear path of what I was going to do for masters and what I was going to do after my masters, because I was aiming for employment, because it's very difficult to find employment in the field with just a psychology degree. So I had this very clear path of what I would do to get a job. But then things come up and you're like, wow, I love that. That's amazing. I have actually really enjoyed the research modules a lot more than what I thought. And actually those are what I got the best grades in, which I really wasn't expecting. Because when I saw SPSS, I wanted to cry. So that was a surprise to me, because then again, with the self-belief, I was like, oh, wow, I can do this. This is crazy. We covered a lot of psychological kind of foundations on a very broad level in first year. I'm particularly looking forward to doing biopsychology in second year, because that is a huge interest of mine. So I imagine I will again have a similar thought process when that comes up next year, that, actually maybe I want to go into this instead. But it changes, a lot. So who knows what I will be applying for at the end of year 3 to go on to masters.
Well, impressive to start with. I mean, of course, to have clear information, being informed and aware of various opportunities, that is really important, because you should never be in a shell. So, of course, and to be fair, in your first year of undergrad or even during your school time is when you need to understand that there are various opportunities and you do not have to stick to the few normal options that are actually known in society.
Yeah.
Did you get to know a lot about the interdepartmental or interdisciplinary nature of neuroscience, psychology, and other related clinical fields as such? Were you aware at a large scale that it is one of the most interdepartmental or interdisciplinary area that you're entering, because right now you said that you really want to go into biopsychology, and then you previously mentioned that pharmacotherapy and other cognitive therapy is something that your interest was inclined towards. But I could already see that you really appreciate the variety of opportunities there is. So how do you plan on moving forwards with it, and like, is there any further details to it?
I think I'm only really aware of how broad it is, just because of my own personal interest and the reading I've done over the years. I think typically as an undergraduate going into psychology, you have this idea that you'll leave university and get a psychologist job, but that just doesn't happen. I feel that there needs to be perhaps like, you don't want to kind of, break dreams of people and whatever, but I just feel like there needs to be more of a touch of reality to incoming undergrads, just to say, look, the industry is tough. And, it's very competitive. Even if you decide to go into clinical psychology, to even get a place to train as a clinical psychologist is extremely competitive. Mm-hmm. And people need to know this before they start, I think, in their first year, because if something's competitive, it means you have to give your all and your best. So you can't even waste your first year. You have to put in 100% from the get-go, because you need the best grades. You need to get all of the extracurricular stuff you can to kind of boost your CV. I just think that incoming undergrads need that kind of information. I already had a good understanding just because of I have friends in the field, friends who are doing doctorates in counselling psychology, and so I just, I've been very lucky to have that around me, but a lot of people don't have that. So yeah, I'd probably say that.
I could see that as well. As a psychology student, because I did want to be a clinician, but I was curious on where I was meant to go get this experience.
Yes.
And that's another thing that students might not understand at the start, is that experience is everything. Like a person can get a degree, great.
Yeah.
But get that experience alongside it, especially like in the type of clinician work that you want to do, anything from being like a suicide hotline advisor, that's huge. On your CV, that looks amazing. Or if you're, I think I had a friend who worked in the student services for eating disorders. That's
Amazing.
Great too.
Yeah.
Like anything at that entry level, and it's also training, because
yes.
It's being interpersonal, and personality goes a long way when it comes down to these things.
Yep.
But being young, like you say, you're entering university at 18 years old.
Yep.
That's going to sound scary if you're going to run a support group at 19, or like that. That's going to sound a bit. That felt weird to me just saying it, actually. I can't imagine a 19-year-old being shoved into a room with a bunch of people that have problems and you have to talk through them. You're an adult yourself. You've been an adult for about a year now.
Yeah.
What experience do you have? And you're going to tell them how you live their life? I could see that being a bit of a stop block for psychology students.
Yeah.
But hopefully, like, for the neuroscience aspect as well, if you're going into neuroscience, there isn't much in the field of like being a therapist. There isn't such a thing as neuroscience therapists that I know of. I know there's neurotherapy, but that's more of like a medical side of things.
Yeah.
And especially dealing with like a very fragile, I guess.
Yeah.
It's very fragile, like for the brain and whatnot. And like, I guess you can't really treat the brain mentally, physically, or I guess you can with exercise and that kind of thing, but you can't just go in there and fix a few wires like you're a neurosurgeon.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
But as you kind of mentioned, the experience that you get along with that and giving it your all, like, maybe what do you think a student, like not the first day, but like the first week, get your grounding, but then the second week as a student, what's your next job? I
think making connections with people was probably the most important thing, because above academics, you should always put your mental well-being first, because that's the foundation of everything. You're not going to do well academically if you're feeling isolated and lonely and lost and, depressed because you're away from home for the first time. You need people. Mm-hmm. We're social creatures, so I would say join societies, attend freshers events, try your best to meet people, because there are some amazing people. And, as we've discussed, you can meet some of the best friends you'll have for life at university, and it just happens. And yeah, I'd say just even if you're really, really shy, just go and try and join something, a sports team, anything. Like
join Neurogether.
Yes, absolutely. Because we're a friendly bunch.
Shameless plug. Yeah. Yeah. Join Neurogether.com. Yeah, but absolutely. That's definitely what you could do there, and hopefully eventually we'll have like advertisements for these sort of things. But I guess the whole point of it, like, we're trying to facilitate journeys.
Yeah.
And whether it be in neuroscience, but I guess psychology and neuroscience are very slowly but surely kind of colliding at the minute.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, there's a huge overlap.
Huge.
Yeah.
And I think that eventually we're going to call it psychoneuroscience. Like, we're going to get to that point almost.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder about that. Or at least to have a subdivision.
Yeah, because you've kind of got, you've got neuropsychology in the sense of dealing with neurodevelopmental kind of issues, and then things that cover things like strokes and Alzheimer's and that kind of thing. But yeah, there is a lot of overlap. But again, it's still, you've got these specific little
subdivisions
groups,
and subdivides.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then they even go into other fields as well, like gut biology and
Interception is high right now.
Yeah, interception as well. That's huge. Yeah, that's becoming massive. That's for sure. Those are like the next big things, I think, that are really popping up.
Yeah.
Exciting to be on the journey, though. Like, that's...
Yeah, it's funny you should mention gut biology, because that's actually a current interest of mine, which is really random and bizarre, but I've been doing a lot of extra reading at home in my own time just about the stuff that's coming out now, about the effects that has on how your brain works.
Yeah.
And it's amazing.
Attended a BPS conference. Oh, yeah, and if you're a psychology student in the UK, definitely, like, attend BPS conferences.
Yes.
That's huge.
I really want to do that. Yeah.
And hopefully they're going to... The ones that were in person were really good as well. Like, we used to have ones at Club Baruch, I think, in Cambridge.
Oh, nice.
And that was way back in the day. That's like almost 3 years ago. But hopefully they'll pick those up again, because those are really fun. But I did speak to someone at a recent BPS conference that did work on flavonoids. And what those are, like, specific flavors that actually make us happier.
Yeah,
and, like,
absolutely.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's going to be good to see in the next few years.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, we're coming to an end of the close of the podcast. You did fantastic.
Thank
in fact,
you.
Utkarsh, you did very fantastic too. Your first ever podcast. Our first ever podcast together. That's very exciting as well. As we close out, is there anything that you'd like to say to the listeners out there before we sign off?
Well, I'd like to thank you guys for having me. It's been an honor. And probably just my leaving message is just, don't let your brain tell you that you can't do something. Just go for it. Just try.
Thank you so much, Shanna. It was absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
And me, Carter, and my fellow co-founders for Neurogether, we do aim on bringing more journeys to all of you. And because neuroscience, it being interdepartmental, the people that I've met so far in this field, they all have their own journey. And I think our aim is definitely to bring that journey so that people can be aware of various aspects of the field that we love so much. Well, that'll be all for now. Thank you so much for listening to us, and hopefully you would be listening to us in future as well. And we would love to provide you with more and more amazing content and make you meet new amazing people that we know. All right. Thank you. 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 You.